It was a normal Tuesday morning in most parts of the country, but for one public figure, it was the beginning of a day that would change everything. The air was warm, the streets were busy, and people were getting on with their daily routines. No one could have guessed that in just a few hours, social media feeds all over the world would be flooded with pictures that would cause a storm of attention, criticism, and speculation. The incident had actually happened the day before, in a small town hall event held inside a bright, crowded auditorium. The event was open to the public, and people of all ages were there. Parents, grandparents, workers who had taken a day off, and a group of teenagers who had come together out of curiosity and excitement. The atmosphere inside was buzzing with energy. The public figure, a person known for their confident speeches and sometimes fiery expressions, was on stage answering questions from the audience. The session had been going smoothly at first. People asked about local issues, the economy, and even some personal questions, which the figure handled with a mix of charm and seriousness. Cameras from local media were positioned at the back of the room, and several people in the audience were holding up their phones to record or take pictures. But then a moment happened that no one could have predicted. As the figure was speaking, a small group of teenagers in the middle rows suddenly stood up. They were holding homemade signs made from bright-colored cardboard with large letters written in marker. The messages on the signs were short, but their meaning was clear. They were there to express disagreement with the public figure's ideas. The room shifted instantly. People turned their heads toward the teens. Some gasped, others whispered, to their neighbors. The figure on stage noticed the movement and paused mid-sentence, eyes locking onto the group. What followed was just a few seconds of reaction, but those few seconds would soon become the center of a worldwide conversation, Public figures' eyebrows rose, their mouth opened slightly as if surprised, and then they began speaking directly to the teenagers. Their hands moved in big, expressive gestures, as they often did when speaking passionately. Some people in the room thought the moment was intense but normal. Others thought it felt tense. Among the audience, one person had their phone camera, perfectly aimed at the stage. They tapped the record button just as the public figure was mid-reaction, one hand in the air, mouth open in a wide expression, eyebrows furrowed. Another person, sitting on the other side of the room, snapped a still photo at almost the exact same time. Neither of them knew that these images would soon travel faster than they could imagine. By the end of the event, the teenagers had sat down again, the figure had continued answering questions, and the atmosphere slowly returned to its earlier energy. Some audience members even forgot about the short disruption, but the photos and short video clips were already saved on phones, ready to be shared. That evening, as the sun set and streetlights began to glow, one of the audience members uploaded a few of those pictures to a popular social media platform. They didn't expect much. Maybe a few likes from friends, maybe some comments from people who had been there, but within minutes the post started gaining attention. First, a few strangers saw it and shared it. Then, a local news blogger reposted it with a dramatic caption about the explosive reaction of the public figure. More shares followed. People began adding their own captions, jokes, and opinions. Some thought the photos were funny. Others thought they were shocking. And some simply shared them without comment, letting the pictures speak for themselves. By midnight, the images had been reposted thousands of times. People in other cities, even other countries, were seeing them on their timelines. The public figure's face, caught in that split second of animated reaction, was becoming the internet's newest obsession. Early the next morning, the public figure's team had not yet realized how far the photos had traveled. But for millions of people scrolling through their phones while sipping coffee or riding buses to work, the pictures were everywhere. Headlines began appearing online. Public figure loses cool at town hall, and teen protest sparks big. Reaction. Some articles kept their tone light, treating the story as a strange little internet moment. Others suggested it was proof of something deeper, that the figure was too emotional or too unprofessional. Meanwhile, supporters of the figure jumped into the online debate, defending them and saying the photos were misleading. The social media algorithms, noticing the high engagement, pushed the posts into more and more feeds. Even people who didn't follow politics were stumbling across the images. For them, it wasn't about the policies or the protest signs. It was about the face, the wild mid-sentence expression, frozen forever in pixels, and now accompanied by an avalanche of captions and memes. By late morning, the public figure themselves became aware of the situation. Sitting in a private office, they scrolled through their phone, seeing the same few seconds of their life being played and replayed from multiple angles. They knew instantly that the moment had been taken out of context, but they also knew the internet rarely cared about full explanations. In the hours to come, their day would be filled with calls from advisors, messages from friends, and requests from journalists for a statement. But for now, they sat silently, the screen glowing in their hands, wondering how such a small moment in a crowded room could have grown into something so massive overnight. What the public figure didn't know yet was that this was just the beginning. The photos would not fade away quickly. The internet storm was already gathering more strength, and by the end of the day, it would feel less like a passing joke and more like a whirlwind that would follow them for weeks, maybe months, and somewhere, in a small bedroom lit only by the glow of a computer screen, one of the teenagers from the event was watching it all unfold. They weren't sure if they felt proud, worried, or just stunned. The moment they thought would be a small, symbolic act had now traveled across the globe, and it was impossible to control what came next. By the time the sun had fully risen the next day, the pictures from the town hall were no longer just local gossip. They were everywhere. It was as if the internet had decided, overnight, that this was the one thing everyone needed to see. Whether people cared about politics or not, didn't matter. The image of the public figure mid-reaction had become unavoidable. On the first wave, the posts spread among people who already followed political news. Then the second wave came, ordinary users, scrolling through their feeds while having breakfast, who shared it simply because it was unusual or funny. The expressions in the photos seemed exaggerated, almost cartoon-like, which made them perfect material for jokes and captions. Someone on the other side of the country added a short, sarcastic sentence under one of the photos. That post alone gathered thousands of likes in an hour. Another person made a split-screen image. On one side was the public figure's expression, and on the other side was a famous movie character reacting in a similar way. That comparison went viral, too. Soon, even people who had no idea where the photo came from or why it was taken were sharing it. It became one of those internet moments where the original story didn't matter as much as the way people could twist it into their own creative content. Memes popped up in every style, from clever wordplay to silly edits where the figure's face was placed in unexpected scenes like outer space or famous paintings. News websites, always hungry for trending topics, started publishing quick articles. Many of them used the same headline pattern: a catchy phrase, a dramatic word like explosive or unbelievable, and then the viral image itself. Some articles tried to explain what had happened, but most simply repeated what was already circulating online, adding a few guesses or quotes from people who had been there. Television talk shows caught wind of it as well. Morning hosts joked about it while sipping coffee on set. One of them said, "This is what I look like when my alarm goes off," and the audience laughed. Another said, "Maybe they just saw the price of rent in the city," earning another wave of laughter. While the humor continued online, there was also a serious side forming in the conversation. A growing number of users began debating whether the images were fair to the public figure. Some insisted that a single frame couldn't capture the truth of a moment, while others argued that the reaction spoke for itself. The discussion became a digital tug-of-war. On one end, people treated it as harmless entertainment. On the other, Some saw it as a sign of bad leadership or poor composure. And in the middle were thousands of people who had no opinion at all. They just enjoyed being part of something everyone else was talking about. Meanwhile, the teenagers from the town hall event were watching the chaos from their homes. Some of them were amused at how big it had become, while others were uneasy. None of them had planned for this kind of attention. Their protest had been small and personal, meant for the people in that room. Now, it was connected to a global conversation they couldn't control. Back in the public figure's world, things were starting to get more complicated. Their phone was buzzing nonstop with notifications, but they weren't from friends. Reporters were sending interview requests. News outlets wanted an official comment. Even radio stations were calling the office, hoping to get a quick soundbite for their afternoon shows. Inside the office, the atmosphere had shifted from the usual calm planning to a kind of quiet panic. Aides were huddled around computer screens, reading what people were saying online. Some argued that it was better to ignore the whole thing, that the internet would move on to something else soon. Others warned that silence could make it worse, letting the jokes and criticism grow without any pushback. The public figure, however, was mostly silent. They sat at their desk reading a few of the articles, scrolling through the memes, and occasionally shaking their head. They weren't angry so much as surprised at how fast something so small could snowball into something so big. At one point, they looked out the office window at the street below. Cars passed by, people walked to work, buses pulled up to the curb, and no one seemed to be thinking about what was happening online. It struck them how different the internet world and the real world could be, and yet how one could so quickly affect the other. In online spaces, the pace wasn't slowing down. The algorithms kept pushing the pictures to more and more people. Every new caption, every new joke, every small addition to the story made it even more likely to appear in someone else's feed. It was like a snowball rolling down a hill, growing, larger with every turn. Some social media users began digging deeper. They looked up old videos of the public figure, searching for moments that could be connected to this new viral clip. A few posted compilations of other expressive reactions the figure had made in past speeches. Supporters saw these as playful, critics saw them as proof of a pattern. The teenagers also found themselves in the spotlight, though to a smaller degree. A few people recognized them from the event and sent them messages online, some supportive, some curious, and a few that felt uncomfortably personal. That was the moment they realized how strange and unpredictable viral attention could be. Back. In the newsroom of a major media outlet, an editor decided to make the story a headline for the afternoon update. "People can't stop sharing this reaction," the headline read. The article included not just the original photo, but a collection of the most popular memes it had inspired. It was, in a way, the internet feeding itself. The more attention it got, the more content people created, and the more content there was to share. By the end of the day, it wasn't just a viral photo anymore. It was a full-blown internet phenomenon, with its own jokes, debates, and even merchandise. A small online store popped up selling t-shirts with a cartoon version of the reaction face. Someone else offered stickers, mugs, and even phone cases. It was strange proof that in the digital age, almost anything could be turned into a product if enough people noticed it. But for the public figure, it wasn't merchandise or memes that mattered most. It was the knowledge that their image was now being shaped by a single frozen moment. They understood that in politics and public life, controlling the narrative was crucial. Right now, the narrative was running wild without them. As evening approached, the frenzy showed no signs of slowing. It had been less than 24 hours since the pictures first hit the internet, but it already felt like a week's worth of chaos. The public figure knew that if they didn't take action soon, the storm might grow into something even bigger. Something that could leave a lasting mark on their reputation. And somewhere, on the countless glowing screens around the world, the same few seconds of that town hall moment continued to loop endlessly. a reminder of how quickly the internet could turn an ordinary day into something unforgettable. While the internet was busy laughing, debating, and sharing the viral photos, a very different scene was unfolding behind closed doors. Inside the public figure's private office, the atmosphere was tense but controlled. The blinds were half drawn. The air conditioner hummed softly, and several members of the team were gathered around a large wooden table. The public figure sat at the head of the table, their phone face down in front of them. They had already seen enough of the memes and headlines for one morning. Instead, they wanted to hear from the people they trusted most, their advisors, press officers, and event organizers. One of the younger aides, who had been monitoring social media all night, cleared their throat and began. "The clip and the photos are still spreading at a high rate," they said, sliding a printed sheet across the table. It showed numbers, thousands of shares per hour, millions of views, and a chart that was climbing upward. "Most people aren't even talking about the town hall anymore," the aide continued. "They're just using the reaction for jokes." Another advisor spoke up, their voice calm but serious. "It's not just jokes. Some commentators are saying it shows you can't handle criticism well. They're framing it as proof that you lose control under pressure." The public figure leaned back in their chair, folding their arms. "It was 10 seconds, they said quietly. 10 seconds in a 2-hour event, and now it's everywhere." Everyone in the room knew that moments like this could be dangerous in the public world. A short clip or a single photo could become the main thing people remembered, even if it was completely out of context. The truth, the full explanation, often didn't travel as far or as fast as the first impression. That was when one of the event organizers spoke up. "We should talk about what actually happened in the room," they said. "People weren't there. They don't know the signs the teenagers were holding or what they said before the moment in the photo. Maybe if we explain it, people will understand." The public figure nodded slowly. "Then let's go over it. Every detail." And so they began to replay the events of the day before. The organizer described how the group of teenagers had been quiet during the first part of the event, sitting together in the middle rows. Then, at a planned moment, they had all stood up with their signs. The signs weren't offensive, but they were clearly designed to challenge the public figure's positions on certain issues. They didn't yell or interrupt for long, the organizer said, but they did speak up. One of them called out a question while holding up their sign. The public figure remembered that exact moment, the quick change in the room's energy, the shifting eyes of the audience, and the heat of the lights on the stage. They also remembered their own reaction, surprise, followed by the instinct to respond firmly. "What people don't see in that picture," they said, "is that I was trying to answer their question. My hands were moving because I was explaining. My face looked animated because I was speaking with energy. That's all it was. But frozen in a photo, it looks like something else entirely." An aide tapped their pen against the table thoughtfully. "Then we need to get the longer video out there. The full clip shows you listening to them, answering, and then moving on. If people see that, it might calm things down." The press officer hesitated. "It might help," they admitted. "But sometimes when you release more footage, it just gives people more material to twist. We have to be careful." The room fell quiet for a moment. Outside, faint traffic noise drifted through the window. Everyone was thinking the same thing. This wasn't just about one event anymore. It was about managing a fast-moving public perception. Later that afternoon, a small group from the team began going through the recordings from the town hall. They found the original unedited video from the camera at the back of the room. It showed the full sequence, the teenagers standing up, the signs being held, the short verbal exchange, and the public figure responding. Watching it in real time, it didn't seem dramatic. The exchange lasted less than a minute, and most of it was a calm back and forth. But they all knew the internet had already decided what the moment looked like. Once a certain image stuck in people's minds, it was hard to replace it. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, The teenagers were also reliving the moment in their own way. They gathered at a small cafe, sitting around a corner table, their phones buzzing constantly. "I didn't think it would get this big," one of them admitted, scrolling through a feed full of edited images. "Me neither," another said. "I just wanted to hold up the sign, make my point, and that's it. Now my cousin in another city is texting me about it." They talked about the mixed reactions they'd been getting online. Some people praised them for speaking up. Others told them they were disrespectful. Most messages came from strangers, which made it feel even more surreal. Back in the public figure's office, the day wore on. Calls were made to friendly journalists, quietly sharing the idea that more context was coming. Supporters were encouraged to speak up on social media, posting messages about the full story. As the hours passed, the public figure thought about how moments like this could shape someone's career. They had been in public life long enough to know that perception could be as powerful as reality. A single misunderstood image could become a label that followed you for years. They also thought about the teenagers. They were young, passionate, and eager to be heard. In another setting, the public figure might have admired their determination, even if they disagreed with their views. But here, in this viral storm, the teenagers had unintentionally set off a chain reaction that neither side could fully control. In the late evening, the team finalized a plan. The longer video would be released the next morning, accompanied by a short statement. The statement would be calm, factual, and free of any personal attacks. It would simply explain what had happened, encourage people to watch the full exchange, and invite them to judge for themselves. The public figure approved the plan, but they knew it wouldn't magically erase the memes or the headlines. Once something went viral, it lived its own life. All they could do was add their side to the story and hope it reached enough people to make a difference. As the office slowly emptied for the night, the public figure stayed behind, sitting alone for a few minutes. The city lights glowed through the window. Somewhere out there, people were still sharing that frozen expression, laughing, debating, or simply scrolling past it. And somewhere else, the teenagers were also looking at the same image, each with their own feelings about what it meant. The truth, the public figure thought, was that none of them could fully control what the world decided to remember. The next morning began earlier than usual for the public figure's team. Before sunrise, the lights in the office were already on. Coffee cups were scattered across desks, and the sound of typing filled the room. Everyone knew this was the day. They had to act. The plan had been agreed on the night before. Release the full, unedited video of the town hall moment, along with a calm and factual statement. No heated language, no personal remarks, just the context they felt the public deserved to see. At exactly 8 a.m., the team posted the video to the public figure's official social media accounts. The caption read, "Here is the full exchange. From the recent town hall event. We encourage everyone to watch the entire clip and judge for themselves. This was a respectful discussion, and we appreciate all voices in the room, even those who disagree." The statement was followed by a link to the 2-minute video. It showed everything. The teenagers standing up, holding their signs, asking their short question, and the public figure responding with animated gestures and a strong voice. In the wider shot, it was clear there was no shouting match, no heated fight, just an intense but civil moment. Within minutes, the comments started rolling in. Supporters praised the decision to release the video. "This clears it up," one person wrote. "That picture made it look way worse than it really was." Another said, "This is why you should always see the full story before judging." But the internet, as always, was divided. While many appreciated the context, others insisted that the original image still showed something important about the figure's personality. "Doesn't matter if it was 10 seconds or 10 minutes, one critic wrote. "That face tells me all I need to know." Some simply didn't care about the explanation. They preferred the jokes, the memes, and the humor the photo had created. "Full video is nice," one user commented, "but that meme of you with the popcorn bucket is still my favorite." By mid-morning, news outlets had picked up the release. Some ran headlines like, "Full video shows viral town hall moment in new light." Others went with more skeptical titles, such as, "Public figure responds to internet frenzy, but will it change minds?" Inside the office, the public figure watched as the coverage unfolded. They weren't surprised by the mixed reaction. In the digital age, they knew, once an image went viral, it took on a life of its own. Still, releasing the video had been the right move. At least now, their side of the story was out there. The press officer suggested doing a short interview with a friendly news channel that afternoon. "It's not just about explaining," they said. "It's about showing that you're not hiding from this. People respect it when you face things head-on." The public figure agreed. That afternoon, they sat down in a small studio with warm lights and a single interviewer. The questions were straightforward. What happened in the moment? How did they feel about going viral? Did they think it was fair? The public figure kept their tone measured. They explained the setting of the town hall, the importance of letting everyone speak, and how easy it was for a single image to be taken out of context. They didn't insult the teenagers. In fact, they said, "I respect their right to speak up even though we disagree. Democracy is about hearing all voices." The clip from that interview was shared widely too, and while it didn't erase the memes, it added another piece to the puzzle for people following the story. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, the team continued their own small battles. They contacted journalists they knew, asking them to include the link to the full video in their coverage. They reached out to supporters with large online followings, encouraging them to post messages defending the public figure. Some agreed, others hesitated, not wanting to get caught in the noise. In a quiet moment between calls, the public figure scrolled through their phone and saw a new meme. Their face from the town hall had been edited onto a famous painting. It was absurd and a little funny, and despite themselves, they smiled. Still, the fight for perception wasn't over. Late that evening, a round-table discussion aired on a popular news channel. Several commentators debated whether the public figure's reaction had been appropriate. One insisted the moment had been blown out of proportion. Another argued that public figures needed to expect this kind of scrutiny and handle it without any dramatic expressions. The debate carried on, but the public figure didn't watch the whole thing. They'd already spent 2 days living inside the story. Instead, they sat with a cup of tea, thinking about what they had learned from the experience. The next morning, the office received fresh reports from the social media monitoring team. Engagement with the viral photo had started to slow slightly. The full video was still being shared, and a few articles were now focusing on the bigger conversation: how a single image could shape public opinion. The public figure knew the storm wouldn't vanish overnight, but they felt a small sense of relief. They had spoken, they had shown the truth as they saw it, and now the internet would decide what to do with it. In the days that followed, other stories began to push the viral moment off the front page of news sites. A major sports event took over headlines, followed by an unexpected weather story. The internet moved on, as it always did, yet the moment didn't disappear completely. The image still popped up occasionally in jokes or comment threads. It had become part of the endless library of internet culture. One of those expressions people might pull out months later for a laugh. For the public figure, it was a reminder that in their world, every moment in public could be captured, shared, and reshaped into something new. The fight to control the story never truly ended, but at least this time they had fought back, and somewhere, perhaps in another small cafe, the teenagers who had stood up that day were also moving on with their lives. But like the public figure, they would always remember the strange, unpredictable chain of events their small protest had set in motion. Weeks passed. But the memory of the town hall moment didn't fade completely. Even though the storm of headlines had died down and the internet had shifted its attention to other topics, the public figure knew that the incident had left a mark. It wasn't just a passing embarrassment. It was a lesson, one they would carry into every future public appearance. Life slowly returned to its normal rhythm. Meetings filled the calendar, speeches were written, and travel schedules were planned. But in the back of the public figure's mind, there was always the awareness that somewhere, someone might still be watching for another moment. The camera lens never truly turned off. In the weeks after the viral photos, the public figure became more deliberate with their gestures during speeches. Where before they would move their hands freely and use wide expressions to show emotion, now they kept movements smaller, more measured. When they answered tough questions, they paused before responding, choosing words carefully. The communications team noticed the change. "You're speaking more slowly," one aide remarked during a rehearsal. The public figure simply nodded. "I have to. Every second in public could be frozen into something else." Privately, the figure admitted that the viral incident had shaken their trust in how moments were presented online. The original event had been calm, even respectful, but the internet had turned it into something completely different. It wasn't that they were angry about criticism. That was part of public life. It was the feeling that control over their own image could slip away in just a few seconds. Meanwhile, the teenagers who had sparked the moment also moved on with their lives. School took up most of their time, along with sports, part-time jobs, and college applications. But every now and then one of them would get a message from someone asking, "Weren't you part of that town hall thing?" They would smile awkwardly and say yes, but they didn't dwell on it. Still, they had learned something too. The internet could turn a small, personal action into something much bigger than expected. It could amplify voices, but it could also twist them into symbols that didn't fully match reality. One afternoon, about a month after the video release, the public figure attended another community event. The crowd was large, with families, students, and reporters all gathered under a wide, open tent. As the public figure stepped up to the microphone, they scanned the audience. There, near the middle, was a group of young people holding signs again. The signs were about a completely different issue, but the sight instantly brought back the memory of the viral photos. The public figure took a deep breath. Instead of reacting with surprise or frustration, they smiled and invited the young group to step closer. "I see you have something to say," they told them warmly. "Why don't you come up and share your point?" The crowd murmured with interest. The teenagers exchanged glances, clearly surprised at the invitation. Slowly, one of them stepped forward and spoke into the microphone, sharing their perspective. The public figure listened carefully, nodded, and thanked them before responding in a calm, steady voice. Cameras flashed. Phones recorded. But this time, the moment played out differently. The expressions were relaxed, the tone was respectful, and the public figure kept control of their gestures. Later, when short clips from the event appeared online, the comments were far more positive. Some even compared it to the viral moment from weeks before, saying, "Looks like they learned from the last time." Behind the scenes, the communications team felt a quiet satisfaction. "That," one aide whispered to another, "is how you handle it." Over the next few months, the public figure developed a new routine for every public appearance. Before stepping onto a stage, they would take a few seconds to breathe deeply and focus. They reminded themselves, stay calm, stay steady, stay in control. It wasn't about being less passionate. It was about making sure passion didn't get twisted into something it wasn't. The incident also became a private teaching tool within the team. When training new staff, the communications director would sometimes pull up the side-by-side images, the viral photo and the full video. This is the difference between perception and reality, they would say, and this is why we plan for every possible moment. Though the public figure didn't speak about the incident much anymore, it continued to influence how they approached their work. They began encouraging young people to engage in respectful discussion rather than quick, attention-grabbing stunts. They also spoke openly about the power of context, urging audiences to look beyond headlines and single images. And while the internet had long moved on to new memes and new stories, the viral moment still lingered in corners of online culture. Occasionally, it would resurface in a playful comment thread or as part of a "Remember When" post. Sometimes the public figure would catch sight of it and feel a small sting, but other times they would just shake their head and smile at how unpredictable life in the public eye could be. One evening, months after the storm had passed, the public figure walked home from a late meeting. The streets were quiet, and the air was cool. They passed a small cafe where a group of teenagers laughed over something on a phone screen. It reminded them of the young faces at the town hall that day, bold, determined, and unafraid to be seen. In that moment, the public figure realized something important. No matter how carefully they managed their image, there would always be unexpected moments. Some would be flattering, others embarrassing, but all of them were part of the unpredictable, messy truth of public life. The lesson wasn't about avoiding every risk. It was about staying grounded, knowing who you were, and making sure that when those unpredictable moments came, and they always would, you could face them without losing yourself. And so, with a quieter kind of confidence, the public figure continued their work. They still spoke with passion, still answered questions directly, and still welcomed disagreement. But now, in every crowd, in every room, they carried with them the memory of that single frozen image and the understanding of how much it had taught them. The viral moment had faded from the front page, but its impact would remain for years, shaping not only how the public figure handled the spotlight, but how they understood the strange, powerful world of instant communication.